Having spent the better part of the last 10 years covering the restaurant industry, I've been fortunate enough to cross paths with the country's top chefs. What I've always enjoyed most about these culinary encounters aren't necessarily the meals or the dishes themselves, though they certainly are memorable, but rather the conversations and discussions which we've had once service has come to a close. Now I'm sharing these conversations with you. Join me around the table. This is After Service with Steve. This week, I'm at the living room at Summerhill Guest Estate in Cowies Hill, KwaZulu-Natal. It is here, in this unassuming neighborhood, where Chef Johannes Richter and team have created a one-of-a-kind culinary experience. One which sees fine cooking, hyper-endemic ingredients, and the techniques of Japanese cuisine coming together magnificently to create something truly and wonderfully unique. The end result presented in a glorious 7-course tasting menu. Chef Johannes, thank you so much for being on the show. Always a treat to be at the living room and visiting Summerhill Guest Estate. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, lovely to have you here, Steve.
Fantastic. And I mean, what a year it's been for you guys. Eat Out Restaurant of the Year, one of only 5 restaurants to get, the coveted 3 stars, and a host of, other accomplishments on top of that. It really is amazing having watched your journey from a few years ago to see where you guys have come now. The whole restaurant's different, the space has been renovated. And yeah, how's it been? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a whirlwind. I mean, we've so much hard work I think has paid off and come together, and obviously having so many people that have made this happen. Also from a team point of view, and so many people from outside that have helped us and supported us all the way through here to make all of this come together. So perfectly almost. And last year. Coming out of COVID, we wanted to start the year off with, we started the year off with a lot of ambition, a lot of change, renovating, and so on and so forth. And obviously, to roll in as Restaurant of the Year, I mean, it was phenomenal, big.
That's awesome, and it was so great to see, especially given Durban's somewhat precarious relationship with the culinary community in South Africa. It was amazing to see Durban kind of take the stage for once. I think it's the first time in history that Durban restaurants won Restaurant of the Year.
Yeah, I think, it's something that, I mean, obviously our concept is very locally inspired and Durban plays a big role. But I don't think we've, and we've always had it in the back of our minds that Durban wasn't very renowned for fine dining as such. But I don't think that it ever really, it isn't a thought that ever lingered too much because of all of the, depth of cultural diversity that we have. To us, Durban has always had this, wealth of food and cultural heritage when it comes to food, and that's really something that we've always wanted to build up on. And I mean. We're never going to outshine Cape Town with the winelands and all of the beautiful restaurant scene that you've got there, and it's lovely for us to feature there and get a little bit of credibility for all of the hard work and all of the conceptual work that we've been doing over the last couple of years.
Well, I think it's fantastic. And for those who don't know, all from your family's living room.
Yeah.
Let's maybe touch on the story of Summerhill Guest Estate a bit, and how it all came to be.
Yeah, I mean, we Johanna and I met in Berlin, or maybe even going a little bit further back than that. I'm being German on paper, but growing up here in Durbs since I can basically think. My mother converted our family home, the house that I grew up in, into a guest house. And after studying, I've started pursuing a professional chefing career and met Johanna, and we were very lucky to get a lot of experience in Europe and work in some of the best restaurants around, and wanted to create this an intimate dining experience without any pretense, in a very casual and relaxed setting with real people and real food, and just share a little bit of good vibes. That was really as simple as it started, without having a classical kind of French service where everything's stiff. We wanted people to sit down, relax immediately, and just enjoy an evening out. Yeah.
And I think that's also what's really cool is that it's a family business, and you see it through the restaurant and in every aspect of what happens at Summerhill. You've got your mother, Christine, who runs the guest house part, but is always on the restaurant floor as well. Johanna obviously runs front of house service. Yeah, how is it working together? That's always a...
I mean, look, I don't think that it's nothing that we actually dwell on too much. Hey, we just kind of try and get things done, and obviously every now and then things aren't harmonious because the opinions are different, or and we need to kind of find a bit of diplomacy, which isn't my strength. Luckily the other two are very good at that. But generally, I'm also just very lucky that Johanna and my mother probably get on better than I mean, I'm definitely outnumbered.
Fair enough.
So
it works.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No, it's
amazing.
It works, and I think also the tough time during COVID, where there was everywhere in the industry, and also with us, there was real existential crisis and not really any clarity in what way or how we would move forward. I think that also just brought us together even more, and makes sharing the good times together so much nicer as well.
Yeah, fantastic, amazing, and as we said, lots to celebrate. I want to touch a bit more on that point you made about going to chef overseas a bit. You're being very, very humble as usual. There's a few Michelin star trainings that took place there.
Yeah.
What did you gain there? What was special about those moments for you?
I think just learning the industry standard obviously is very important, and doing a classical French apprenticeship, not in France but in Germany, was something that just shifted my outlook on food completely. And it started off with the amazing produce that we were getting in, and then being able to work with people that have just spent years and years and years in the industry and have gained experience of or have 50 years of experience under their belt, was a game changer for me. And just learning the real classic is something that I think will always be a big feature in our cooking. And I think especially when it comes to a lot of our sauces, there's a very classic background. A lot of our meat dishes are prepared with a very kind of classic outlook as well. And I think that French base is something that we'll always draw from.
Yeah, almost kind of a cornerstone.
Definitely,
what you guys are doing.
100%. And we're not shy on butter.
Not really tied to it. No, of course. And I think, that brings us to the menu. I was very lucky to have a beautiful meal here last night. And as I said, it's just watching the progression of you guys, your evolution has been really, awesome to see. And to see where the food has come.
It's so nice also to share that, really cool. And to have, people like yourselves there that really have seen I don't think that, we're still very humble where we are now, but to see the very, very humble beginning that we were at, and to see the little bit utopic outlook that we had at that time.
Yeah. And it was, we had that first experience when I was dining here where everything had gone wrong that day. I think it was a foundation for a good friendship. But even then, the food was still really good. But coming back to this current menu, and what I enjoyed last night is, I think there's a lot more restraint going into your food. It's very much a focus of what's on the plate, not how much more we can add to the plate.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about tell me a bit about how you came about conceptualizing this menu, given it is such a seasonal approach to cooking that you do here.
So I think the kitchen team has obviously grown. We've been very lucky to get a lot of skilled chefs that are obviously the backbone to the menu that we create. And what was our Achilles heel at the beginning was produce. So by necessity, we tried to do a lot ourselves. We foraged a lot, and I think that still to this day is one of the backbones of what we do, and really try and give the three products that are the dish really the spotlight without trying to spread it too far, and really just try and focus and reduce it down to simple, humble ingredients and give that a little bit of a platform. And Yeah, and I think, from the menu that we have now, we also have a lot of components that are seemingly simple, but have, a lot of time and a lot of effort that have gone
There's
into it.
complexity behind them.
And those, especially the fermented components, are really the soul of our food, because they just add that complexity and the depth as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think you've become known, especially in KZN, but I think if we start looking at, South Africa's whole culinary scene, you're definitely one of the chefs spearheading this idea of hyper-local, hyper-endemic cooking. What was it that, drew you to that style of cooking? You could have easily said, we're here in Durban, let's get our produce in from wherever it needs to be, but you really have become so, renowned for this concept of using KZN, hyper-local, if it's not from the garden where you've grown it yourself, it's from basically on your doorstep from a local producer. How did that come about, and where was the idea from that born?
I think there's a couple of influences. I mean, growing up, I spent a lot of the European summers with my grandparents, and they had a little small holding in Hungary, and they were basically self-sustaining. So they had a vegetable garden, which we harvest our lunch and our dinners from, and fruit orchards, a little bit of wine that was growing, and also slaughtered their own livestock. And I think that's definitely always, it was something that always drew my interest to, like, the beginning, the actual product, the actual produce that goes into making food, and the background behind that. And then the other side is obviously that we, especially in KZN, we really have a story to tell because of all of the influx from, all over the world, from Africa, to Asia, to Europe. We've got this beautiful melting pot here where everyone has interesting outlooks on food and on eating. And that's just a story that we felt needed to be told to a large degree, and a lot of knowledge regarding endemic ingredients, regarding technique, and so on and so forth. It was just being lost, and that's why it was something that from day one we wanted to just give a platform to that. Yeah.
So that's always kind of been at the ethos of what you're doing.
Always, yeah.
And I think it is clear when you go walk through the gardens outside, the vegetable gardens outside, and you see that. I like that you reference the different influences on Durban, because walking through the garden and there's a coffee tree, and then you see there's avocados and mangoes and a whole lot of
susus,
super
the msobo, so definitely, yeah.
And it must make cooking quite a challenge at this level, even more so than normal, because when something's run out, it's run out. Or how do you go about building menus knowing you have to have enough of something to get to the next season, the next stretch?
Yeah, look, at the beginning it was a bit easier because when we started off, the restaurant wasn't busy, and we had days where we thought, oh my, what have we gotten ourselves into? And there we could be a lot more flexible and basically cook on the fly, and we had a lot more kind of creative elements that were going into our cooking as such. But now, with our ambition of creating, thought through and well executed menus, there needs to be a little bit of repetition in there, and there needs to be a little bit of fine-tuning and thought behind it. And working with small suppliers and working with seasonal produce obviously makes it a little bit tricky. So we have to be on our toes and really have to kind of see how we can do that limbo as best as possible. And sometimes we just really have to start a bit earlier and get our things together and make sure that we invest the time and get a new dish out, even if it's on the day. It's kind of
Oh wow! So that quick of a turnaround time.
Yeah, I mean the main course that you had yesterday. Yesterday was the second day that we did that main course, purely because A, we had those beautiful bamboo shoots in, and B, because on Monday a supplier called, or on Tuesday I called one of the suppliers regarding the main ingredient for the main course, and they had load shedding the whole of Monday, so they couldn't deliver, and we had to just improvise and make a plan. So that's kind of the way it then came together. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely want to talk about that main course because I think it was absolutely brilliant. But before we do, I love what you do with fermentation. And I want to touch a bit on that because I think, when fermentation first became the buzzword in food, maybe, locally 7-8 years ago, it was all about Noma and Rene Redzepi, and it was the super scientific, it kind of seemed like it had to be done in a lab. Otherwise, it wasn't going to work properly. But the more we learn, the more we find out that, fermentation is this ancient process.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm picking up through your food that there is definitely this inspiration of going back to, a sense of time and place and using those techniques and those ingredients to incorporate into your menu.
Being seasonal, we really rely on a couple of, or extending and stretching and trying to get the most out of products that, at some stage we don't have. So preserving has always been something that was very important to us, and finding interesting ways of getting the most out of something that you can preserve to add value at a later stage in the year or at a different stage in the year has always been something that's been interesting to us. And fermenting just made sense from the word go, and the Koreans, they use a phrase called sonmat, which means hand taste, which is basically, the reason why everyone's scrambled egg tastes different, because of all the love and, the feeling that goes into something, And I think in fermentation, that's really like the crux of it, we don't go into making a shoyu with the ambition of creating a product that is monotonous and tastes the same every year.
Yeah.
It tastes the way that it tastes because when we made it at that stage, it was a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler, the ferment was different, and I think that really is the beauty of it, that we get a little bit of differentiation. And I mean, the same applies to our sourdough bread. It changes, and I think, that kind of shows the beautiful natural aspect of cooking.
I've heard it referred to as microbial terroir.
Yeah, exactly.
It's literally about, in that moment, what is happening, how it influences what you're making.
And I think, because, we also, have this little bit of a super sterile bubble that we live in, and from a young age, everyone gets told about these bad bacteria and so on and so forth, and
you do those biology class things where you swab a table.
and then, all of a sudden now, people are thinking, oh, wow, this guy's, or these people are basically, rotting pulses to make soy sauce, and, this is hazardous, and, actually it's a process that, as you said, I mean, it's just ancient, and with the, salinity levels that we work at, I mean, nothing can happen. It's a super safe or product that doesn't have to be created in a lab.
Yeah, and I guess based on when it was, first discovered, it really couldn't be refrigerated. It couldn't be stored, using any chemicals.
Exactly. So, the only thing that you had was salt, basically.
And that's how it came about, I imagine.
No, and it's something, I think, especially with our koji ferments, like our misos and our shoyus, that are also like super locally inspired, with amabele sorghum being the one side and dal being the other side, where in Japan soy and wheat is used. I think that is something that also just made sense, and it just brings such beautiful depth, and also in summer just makes it a bit lighter. Then we don't necessarily have to go that buttery French route, but can really use that in a more Japanese kind of approach and keep it a little bit more on the light side without compromising too much on umami and power in a dish.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think what fascinates me is the process that goes into creating a dish, or the process that goes behind a certain ingredient or component. And I think let's use that duck and bamboo dish that you mentioned earlier, because it was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
How do you go about creating something like that? It's such, especially the bamboo, such a strange ingredient. How do you go about cooking it? It was absolutely delicious. Probably my favorite component of the night. Yeah. But how does that dish come together and be like, what, this bamboo will taste great with that duck?
Yeah, I think rationalizing it is very difficult. It's there's a lot of trial and error. I mean, when Michael, the intern, and I went to go and harvest the bamboo, and we did a bit of foraging. Just generally, we actually wanted to just grab some chicken of the woods, which was just popping up everywhere. And then on one of my runs, I saw the bamboo shoots. We went there and we started chopping them off, and curious neighbor was looking down and was thinking, okay, what are these guys doing now? And then I came and brought them to the kitchen, and the whole team was looking at me in a very strange manner. So we cleaned it and then, boiled it over a whole day, basically. And then just started playing around with it. And we knew we were getting in this beautiful duck from Vanessa, and we wanted like an elegant sparring partner that also has texture. And I think that's a really nice thing about that bamboo, is that lovely like young coconut like texture that it has. And it just kind of made sense to work with a little bit of acidity of tamarind in there, with that nice fatty duck, and have a a light kind of upliftment to that really rich duck on the one side. And then we were getting in the chicken of the wood and a couple of lovely porcinis just to give a bit of umami as well. And sweet, sour, salty. That's kind of the orientation of the dish, definitely. Yeah.
So talking about how the menu obviously changes so often and so frequently and is so seasonally reliant. Are dishes always new, or are there sometimes where a dish is transformed for a season?
So there's a lot of testing that goes on, and obviously we always want to progress, and we always want to get the most out of an ingredient. But I think also in exactly that same way, trying to get the most out of an ingredient, we don't always need to necessarily reinvent the wheel, and with the spanspek dish that we've got on the menu at the moment.
Amazing dish. That was a spanspek with the fennel and cashews and the pesto at the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and I mean, I think from an approach, very simple. Just I guess the product speaks for itself. We're just getting these lovely spanspeks in, and we did a similar dish a couple of I think a year or two back with watermelon, with a very similar approach, also texturally. But from a flavor point of view, where the watermelon, we had more of like a also gochujang inspired, like more Asian kind of aroma with feta, and this version is is vegan, with fennel flowers that we preserved from last year as a paste that also marinates the spanspek with a beautiful gazpacho of the spanspek. So it has like a little bit more of a Mediterranean approach.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that Mediterranean approach is just working so well for this time of year, and how hard it is.
No, I mean you guys have witnessed it yesterday. The humidity is like 200%, and it's just warm at the moment, and that's why I always like to start the menu off light. And because we don't use any seafood, vegetables obviously play a big role, and we have a couple of vegetarian items on the menu. So yeah, our greeting board is always vegetarian, and it's just light, animating, has texture, has crunch, has acidity, and a little bit of salinity. And I also like to bring that over into the first dish of the evening as well, where I want people to slowly start engaging, and not be overwhelmed by the first dish as well, and also having a little bit of like spiciness in there as well, just to make everyone wake up and warm everyone up a bit. I think is just important.
Yeah, well, I thought it was a very clever dish. So just light, fresh, beautiful ingredients.
No, we're really enjoying that dish as well, and that fresh pesto. That just gets made every day, I think also just brings everything together so nicely. And also here, I mean, it's harvested 30 minutes before service, made into the pesto, and it's just things that you can taste.
Yeah,
and it's not the most complicated or technical aspect of the dish, but because of its of the freshness and the approach to the basil, it just definitely
for me, it's that layer of texture that really does add. I think it's
with the fennel pearls and
exactly. Fantastic. Yeah, no, and it works so well.
Thank you.
But, we're going into early autumn. What can we expect to change? If they, what's growing in the garden? What you see happening next? Are there any trends that you're hoping to incorporate into the menu?
Yeah. So last year we had in experimenting, we hit a real jackpot with madumbe. And we used madumbe in a koji ferment, and made like a gochujang-inspired umami paste with the madumbe, and it just worked out so nicely. So that's definitely now direction end of summer, autumn, when we harvest our madumbe from the garden. One of the projects that we want to do a bigger batch of, because I think also with time, if we give it a year or two and really just leave it in the wine cellar for a bit, it can develop beautifully, you know, and that's something that I'm really excited about. And otherwise, we're getting a lot of local berries coming out now. We've played around with marula fruit now a little bit, even though that's past now. And then basically moving into more grains, sweet corn and corn is coming through now, as well as a couple of really interesting different types of squash.
Well, I, for one, I'm looking forward to seeing how that takes shape on the next menu. Right now, we're going to cut to a break, and I'll be back with Chef Johannes to talk about things outside of the kitchen.
After Service with Steve is brought to you by Stella Artois, the internationally beloved Belgian beer, crafted from hand-selected ingredients. With a brewing legacy of over 6 centuries, Stella Artois invites us to make time for the life Artois, where we can slow down, savor life's moments, and share the enjoyment of good food, great music, and each other. Join me as I open a beer and chat to the country's top chefs.
I'm back here with Chef Johannes Richter at the LivingRoom at Summerhill Guest Estate, where we've just been talking about all the incredible hyper-endemic, cooking that's been going on, all the fermentation, and just, generally how this has come to be one of the best restaurants the best restaurant in the country.
Yeah.
What we always like to talk about at the end of the show is something outside of the kitchen. And I know you're an avid runner, and you have your second comrades coming up.
Yeah.
So the first thing I have to ask you is, are you absolutely mad? Secondly, this passion for running. Tell me a bit about it. How does it fit into the life of a chef?
Look, I think it's really just my zen. Hey? So we all know the industry. We all know how it is. There's a lot of pressure. And the pace is always high, and sometimes you're always talking, you're always in the middle of things, and I just sometimes need a bit of downtime. And I've got 2 little kids, and at home things are also very busy. So on the road I've just got time for myself, and I can just think a bit. And since I can remember, we've always lived on the comrades route here. So since I can remember, I've watched these crazy people run up or down the hill. And it's been a childhood dream of mine to do it at some stage. And last year I was fortunate enough to enjoy a lovely experience on my first comrades. Yeah. And I'm really excited for this year.
For the second year. No, I think it's incredible. And I think especially since we're seeing the shift in, chefs no longer having to be seen as having these rigorous hours and putting everything into work. I think work-life fun balance is important.
Definitely, and I also think there's obviously also negative sides from the industry and problems that the industry also kind of draws with it. To have a little bit of a vent, I think, is also really important, and to create a bit of balance. Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic.
Without that downtime, even on my runs, food plays a big role, and I'm always scouting for forageables, and I'm thinking of new dishes, and ways of doing things. It's always a constructive time, even though it's not always nice.
Awesome, and good luck for the next race.
Thanks.
It's around the corner. It will be sooner than we know.
Definitely. Yeah.
And in the meantime, where can people find you and the LivingRoom on social media if they are hoping to find you?
So Instagram, the LivingRoom at Summerhill Estate, Facebook, and otherwise, our website.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Chef Johannes, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always great chatting, and I know we can chat on for many more hours. But thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Steve.
And cheers. Congrats on all the successes.
Thank you.
This was an episode of After Service with Steve. Next time, we'll be sitting down with Chef Mabato Molefe. If you enjoyed this episode of After Service with Steve, subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. After Service with Steve is brought to you by Stella Artois.